This is 5 on 20 News, where the news says funny things, but the newscasters say things funny. Rest in peace, Mr. Don Rickles. This is Frank Powers.
And Nick Marquez. It's Thursday, April 6th, and we're coming to you live from the Creative Tucson studio in downtown Tucson. First, let's talk local headlines.
Governor Doug Drop-a-Deucey was a busy boy yesterday as he signed 3 bills into law while vetoing one. The first bill allows people with felony convictions to work in adult drug rehab and reentry facilities. Ducey said the law would lower the barrier for people who have served their time and are looking to get their life back on track. The second bill allows Arizona residents to receive sex offender notifications by email in addition to regular mail. The emails will, I don't know which folder they'll wind up in, but they'll wind up somewhere. Ducey's final bill eliminated 3 medical advisory commissions that dealt with prostate cancer education, advancing biomedical research, and advising Ducey on whether health service is needed. It appears that Ducey now knows everything there is to know about the healthcare system, so he no longer needs them. But it wasn't all approvals for Ducey, as he was able to get one veto into his schedule. Ducey vetoed a law introduced by Representative Don Shooter, which would have exempted emergency power generating stations from air quality regulations. Ducey said that the law was, quote, unnecessary. After hearing him, Representative Shooter muttered, "Well, you're unnecessary," under his breath. Ducey asked him what he said, and Shooter replied that he said nothing.
83 Arizona small businesses are taking part in a national competition that leads to a $25,000 reward to take their work to the next level. The FedEx Small Business Grant Contest ended yesterday and will be narrowed down to the top 100 business ideas by April 13th. The awards will be announced on April 25th, with winners ranging from $7,500 to the grand prize of $25,000, which is to be used to expand the chosen business. Bonnie Volding, the director of contest strategy at FedEx, says the contest is intended to, quote, give small businesses the boost they need while staying on as a trusted advisor in the business's lifecycle. Small businesses all across Arizona are competing, including a Glendale inventor who makes tricked-out wheelchairs for the disabled and a company that puts veterans to work on building homes. There's also the Rising Tycoons program, which teaches teens how to be entrepreneurs and will use the money to fund 180 scholarships to teens from disadvantaged areas. While it still has a chance, it's unclear whether the noodle cooler will be voted as a finalist.
It appears as though Arizona has a little more gender equality than other states, but don't get too excited because that only means that women in Arizona earn 83% of what men make. But this is better than the national average of 80 cents for every dollar that a man makes, according to the recent report by the National Partnership for Women and Families. While 83 cents is better than the national average, it was a drop from the previous year when it was 84 cents. Michelle Lieber, a director at the National Committee on Pay Equity, says that the gap was 60 cents when she began the study. She says the complete equality will be a long time coming, but she believes that it will eventually happen. The report says that if the 17-cent pay gap were closed, this would enable women to buy a year of groceries or afford 8 months of rent or 11 months of childcare. A day before the report was released, a bill called the Paycheck Fairness Act was introduced to finally close the pay gap. This will be the third attempt for the legislation, which died in Congress the past 2 times. Julie Anderson, a research associate for the Institute of Women's Policy Research, says the part of the pay gap comes from women staying away from certain industries. She says that women typically stay away from male-dominated careers, which tend to pay higher wages. Anderson said that, quote, it will be tough to make a serious dent in the wage gap until women begin to break into fields such as engineering and computer programming. But a significant obstacle is that these companies often don't offer flexibility to account for childcare and maternal leave. Another minor obstacle is that corporations are run by women-hating sociopaths. They sure are. But there's a bit tougher problem to solve, especially since one of them is our president.
Residents of southern Arizona have started a project that uses materials left behind by migrants to construct a quilt in memory of the many who have died while attempting to cross the border. The Migrant Quilt Project was started by Jody Ibsen in 2007 in order to humanize migrants who didn't make it across the border. Tattered jeans, backpacks, and love letters are used to create the quilt. Ibsen says she came up with the idea when she was hiking and came across a site that migrants used to change clothes in the Huachuca Mountains. She saw that the site was full of materials that were discarded by the migrants, who moved onto to take the dangerous trek further into the U.S. Since the project's start, Ipsen has collected all of the names of the bodies found along the Tucson sector and examined by the Pima County Office of Medical Examiner. All of these names appear on the quilt, including some bodies that were never identified and labeled as unknown, or desconocido in Spanish. A separate quilt collected the names and causes of death from the 157 bodies found in 2012 alone. 68% of these bodies were unable to be identified because of decomposition. Cornelia Bailey, an activist who works on the quilt, says that she feels like she's honoring these people's lives with the project. The quilts do not use clothing from the deceased, but rather use clothing found at the layup sites, where migrants change their clothes. However, some of the quilts use personal items, such as coins that were sewn inside clothes and pictures found inside pants pockets. Bailey says that it's important to show the humanity of these people, especially with the current political spectrum. She says that these people come here because they are desperate, afraid, and that nobody would cross the desert unless you had no other option.
Arizona Senator Jeff Flake decided to get all cute yesterday, releasing a video for his annual tax loophole findings. Each year, Flake finds the most absurd tax loopholes in order to bring awareness to the public and hopefully get enough people mad to demand that this practice stop. This year, Flake focused on such loopholes as the alpaca tax, where owners of alpacas can deduct the cost of upkeep while keeping them in their backyards. Flake says that alpacas were advertised as walking tax shelters. Another example was the so-called lucky loophole, which allows professional gamblers to deduct their losses, along with writing off gambling trips as business expenses. This would degenerate gamblers to deduct the cost of traveling to casinos, racetracks, along with the cost of meals, entertainment, and other expenses associated with gambling. It's not clear whether other expenses would include paying a prostitute to tell your wife about what happened the night before. This loophole created a cottage industry of people selling bundles of losing lottery tickets, which are marketed as tax write-offs. The Congressional Research Service estimated losses associated with this loophole as amounting to $2.8 billion every year. Billion. Flake released his loophole report in a short, adorable feature with loads of alpacas and even a kitten. Here's a look at the video.
And I wanted to take a moment to talk about the program you're watching right now. Here at 5 on 20, we are undertaking a new kind of citizen journalism. We are going to give you the news as we see it. And we want more people to speak up with us. We need writers, hosts, anchors, camera people, sound people, the whole gamut. The times require a new way of informing ourselves, so join us. Do it. Do it now. Email us at info@creativetucson.org to get involved. And if you think there's a story we're missing, a person we should interview, an upcoming event we should cover, or have any news tips for us, shoot an email to info@creativetucson.org. We are here for you, and we want to cover all stories from all points of views, so don't be strangers. Now, in national and international news.
The president is considering a military strike on Syria in response to a chemical weapon attack that killed or injured at least 100 people on Tuesday. Defense Secretary James Mattis met with Trump to discuss military options against Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad, who is accused of launching the attacks. In typical vague terms, Trump said that, quote, something's going to happen to Syria. Whether this something means an airstrike, an insulting tweet, or a cluster bomb full of kosher mayonnaise remains to be seen. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said today that he had no doubt that Assad ordered the attacks, which Turkish officials concluded used sarin gas, a banned nerve agent. According to NBC News, the U.S. military watched Syria's aircraft drop the chemical weapons onto civilians who responded, quote, consistent with the exposure to the nerve agent. But Russia denies that Assad ordered the attack, instead claiming that an airstrike dropped a bomb on a supply of the chemicals, which were being held by rebel groups. However, experts say that a bomb would have obliterated the chemicals and would not have had the effect of an attack on the civilians. Tillerson also said that in a press conference today that the Trump administration is seeking regime change in Syria and that, quote, these steps are underway to remove Assad. This comes 3 days after the Trump administration stated that Assad would stay in power because of the, quote, political realities. This was a day before the chemical weapons strike, which Senator Marco Rubio said was not a coincidence. In Trump's meeting with Mattis, he was presented with a range of military options, including a grounding all Syrian aircraft, strikes against air defenses, standoff strikes, or airstrikes against chemical weapon facilities. Putting soldiers on the ground is not an option at this point, but it has always become an option when we get entangled in another quagmire. Apparently, the pressure got to Trump, and he's now getting ready to get us embroiled in yet another war, in addition to active operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, and Yemen. At this rate, maybe we'll be the first country to go to war on every continent, which we'll celebrate by going to war with ourselves.
the state of the political atmosphere, we might as well.
Yeah.
A nuclear attack hit the U.S. this morning, devastating Congress and maybe our entire system. Okay, that's a bit dramatic. The Senate decided to use the nuclear option today to counter the filibuster against Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch. Through a simple majority vote, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced that the Senate would go nuclear, effectively changing the way that the chamber works from here on out. With the nuclear option, the Senate will now only need 51 votes to get Gorsuch confirmed, as opposed to the 60 votes that would have beaten the filibuster. The practice allows a single senator to hold up a confirmation hearing or a piece of legislation. Now that the Senate is nuclear, this means that there probably won't be filibusters anymore now that they can be beaten somewhat easily. This means no more Ted Cruz readings of Green Eggs and Ham, no more Rand Paul making 47-hour speeches. We'll miss you, filibuster. Gorsuch's confirmation hearing is set for tomorrow. In the meantime, the Senate will engage in 30 hours of debate that devolve into name-calling and an arm-wrestling match between Mitch McConnell and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. While Democrats are confident in Schumer's abilities, they worry about the Republicans' new nuclear power. McConnell is now able to summon lightning and use his telekinetic abilities to order armies of bees to attack those who question his power.
Not the bees. Not the bees! House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes has bowed out of leading the investigation into the Trump-Russia ties. Nunes delivered the statement this morning claiming that left-wing activist groups have filed accusations against him that he says are false. The charges stem from a late-night meeting with Nunes at the White House where he supposedly either gave or received evidence about the supposed unmasking of Trump's associates. This happened when the FBI conducted normal surveillance against foreign officials who were talking with a member of Trump's campaign staff. Usually, the identity of the foreign officials are revealed and the American side of the phone call is kept confidential. According to Nunes, former Obama National Advisor Susan Rice requested that the calls be unmasked and that the identity of Trump's associates are revealed, a charge which Rice denies. Trump and Nunes said that the evidence confirms Trump's charges of wiretapping, but most of the country doesn't seem to be buying it. Rather, ethics experts said that the midnight meeting with Trump created a huge conflict of interest, not surprising, since conflict of interest is the president's basically his middle name. Nunes said that the charges against him are baseless, but that it's the best interest of Congress that he recuse himself from the investigation. That's the first honest thing Nunes has said since the investigation began. Nunes had resisted stepping down. He'd resisted stepping down last week after the revelations of his last night rendezvous were with the president. CNN correspondent Chris Cizella says that it is doubtful that left-wing activist groups caused Nunes to step down. Rather, he thinks that Nunes was receiving pressure from the White House because the meeting scandal was causing a distraction. And as we've learned, the president likes to distract from the Russian investigations and not bring more attention to it. Even Trump's tweet storms have been unable to make the issue go away. The investigation has already caused former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn to leave his post due to his involvement, along with causing Attorney General Jeff Sessions to recuse himself from the investigation because of his involvement. It's looking like it's getting harder to find a member of the Trump administration who's not involved with Russia in some way. Despite the mounting evidence, Trump isn't going to give up on trying to distract the American public from the investigation. Next week, he plans to jump Dead Man's Gulch on a dirt bike while chugging a Red Bull. The president hopes that this stunt will inspire the American public and keep them from reading the news for a day.
A recent report by the Border Patrol showed that the number of people arrested at the border is at a 17-year low. There were less than 17,000 arrests of undocumented immigrants in March, which was the lowest number since 2000, according to the report. Homeland Security Chief John Kelly credited the president for the drop, calling the numbers, quote, no accident. The month of March marked the 5th straight month of declines, and the total number was about 71% lower than December of 2016. That means we don't need that wall anymore, right? Well, not quite. According to Kelly, he said that while the decline is good news, the U.S., quote, must ensure that the security of our southern border remains a priority to protect the nation. Got it. When asked by Senator John McCain whether he was receiving help from Mexico, Kelly said that he was receiving a, quote, huge amount of cooperation with the Mexicans. But Kelly seemed less certain that we would actually see that big, beautiful wall come true. He said that rather the border would be policed by drones and other technology that will fill in the gaps of the wall. On Tuesday, Homeland Security spokesman said that the Trump administration's request for $2 billion to begin the wall construction would probably not get approval from Congress. However, he said that Homeland Security has the money to start the process and fund the prototypes. According to Homeland Security, they'll come up with the money by settling up a lie jar where 5 cents will be deposited every time a Trump administration tells a lie. The agency assumes that after 6 months, they can raise the $2 billion needed to fund that slammin' sexy wall.
Well, the good news is that Steve Bannon is out of the National Security Council. The bad news is that when he was replaced by UN Ambassador Nikki Haley and, even worse, Energy Secretary Rick Perry. Haley and Perry will now be part of the Council's principal members, which entitles them to attend all meetings of the group and wield significant power in foreign policy decisions. The addition of Haley comes on the same day that she condemned Syrian President Bashar al-Assad for the chemical attack against the people on Tuesday. Bannon was removed due to the decision by National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, who was worried that the Council was becoming too politicized. Along with the departure of Bannon, the Director of National Intelligence and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff were added to the committee. Trump took the two positions off the list after being elected and installed Bannon in the position in a controversial executive order. Critics claimed that Bannon wasn't qualified to be part of the policy discussions. Sure, it's true that neither Rick Perry, but at least he's more dumb than evil, more Gargamel than Dr. Doom.
EPA head Scott Pruitt got a taste of his own medicine yesterday when it was announced that 2 groups were suing the EPA for refusing to ban a pesticide that environmental groups say is dangerous. The Pesticide Action Network and the National Resource Defense Council sued the EPA in federal court to force the agency to ban chlorpyrifos, a pesticide used to kill insects on crops. The pesticide has been linked to disorders of the nervous system and the brain. By 2001, most household uses of the pesticide has been phased out, and the EPA proposed completely banning the chemical under the Obama administration. Last week, the EPA refused to ban the chemical, citing a lack of evidence that it was a danger to human health. Pruitt has been criticized for being cozy to the fossil fuel industry and for suing the EPA over a dozen times as Attorney General of Oklahoma. How does it feel to be sued, Scott? Patty Goldman, who is handling the case as part of Earth Justice, said that, quote, "We are asking the court to protect children by ordering the EPA to take action to ban chlorpyrifos." In defending his decision, Pruitt said last week that banning the chemical would, quote, "provide regulatory uncertainty to the thousands of American farms that rely on chlorpyrifos." Kristen Schaefer said that Dow, the company who makes the pesticide, is a major reason why the EPA refused to ban the substance. She said that, quote, "If it takes a court order for the EPA to stand up to pressure from Dow's lobbyists and do right by children and their families, then so be it." This isn't the group's first rodeo. They launched a similar lawsuit against the Obama administration in order to get the pesticide banned. In 2015, the Obama administration introduced a proposal to ban the chemical. Pruitt plans to countersue the environmental groups just for old time's sake, and then use the reward money to blast a cloud of methane gas into the atmosphere to see what happens.
Some family members of veterans claim that the Veterans Administration kicked them off of the caregiver program with no explanation. The VA's caregiver support system pays a stipend to family members of disabled veterans. Many of these individuals are spouses who have had to leave their career in order to be a caretaker. Alicia Graham was one individual who was taken off the program when VA officials said that her husband, who suffered a brain injury in Iraq, no longer qualified for their caregiver through the program. But the VA denies that there have been cuts to the program and say that they're trying to help as many veterans as they can. The program has become bloated since its introduction in 2011, when it was designed for 4,000 or 5,000 people. Now the program includes almost 23,000 approved caregivers. Graham was approved for the program in 2011 and has heard rumors that the VA was dropping individuals without seeing improvements in the veteran's disability status. NPR studied these cuts, and they found that the VA system lacked consistency across different areas of the country. While over 6,000 caregivers were added since 2014, NPR found that 32 out of 140 VA medical centers were making cuts to the program at the same time. This included the VA in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where Graham was formerly getting her stipend and who was cut off of the program with little explanation. The Fayetteville Center cut half of its caregivers, dropping 314 families from the program between May 2014 and February 2017. Adrian Adizondo of DAV, a nonprofit advocacy group for veterans, said that the VA is aware of the problem and has promised to get better data and look into the way these clinical decisions are decided. Once officials investigated, they were disturbed to find out that the decisions are being made with the bingo calling machine. That's how they get things done over there. And that's how we get things done here. So this was Frank Powers.
And Nick Marquez for 5 on 20 News. Next up, Sophie Gibson-Rush spoke with Simon Tam, the founder and bassist of Portland-based rock band The Slants. The Slants are stopped by the University College of Law today to talk their decade-long trademark battle over their brand name, which has been labeled disparaging to Asian Americans. You can catch their performance tonight at the College of Law Courtyard at 8 p.m.
I'm Sophie Gibson-Rush, joined by Simon Tam of The Slants. So Simon, you said that it's almost been a decade being involved in this battle. In January, you went to the Supreme Court, and not too long after that, you came out with an EP, The Band Who Must Not Be Named. How do you go back to the studio to make music after being so involved in the legal world?
I mean, as an artist, you have to. Even throughout the legal battle, we've needed to carve out time specifically. I think I would just mentally lose it if I didn't, because we're artists through and through, and it's kind of a great way to let out a lot of that frustration and to kind of share about what we're experiencing through our music. So as soon as we actually came back from DC, we went right back into songwriting. We're working on another album right now.
Yeah, the music is really fun. It's dancey, it's rock and roll. I know that all of you have been involved in a very political battle, but would you say the music as it stands alone is political music?
I think us existing as an Asian American band is a political act to begin with.
Right.
Our music didn't necessarily have politics involved, not until our most recent release. And for us, our intent of having a song called From the Heart, which is kind of our open letter to the trademark office, is intended to kind of be our final say on the matter. We don't want to be known as the band that's going to court all the time. Certainly that's been a big part of our history, but we want the music to be able to stand on its own, with or without a bunch of lawyers around.
Yeah. Back to the very beginning of The Slants, a lot of bands resist categorization, and a girl band comes to mind, but you seem to use it with irony and humor. Was that an original decision when naming the band and when deciding on the genre?
In some ways, yes, because I think tools like irony, satire, and wit can neuter malice.
Yeah.
In other ways, not as much, because I was never called a slant, and the majority of Asian Americans don't find the term to be disparaging. It's usually slant eye is the disparaging term, or people use gestures to communicate that instead. And so for us, it wasn't that controversial, but I thought through the name, we can kind of convey important social issues through our work and use it as a platform to create important conversations about racial identity.
I just have one more question. The story you told about your experience with a record label that you idolized, wanting you to replace the lead singer of your band with a white lead singer, really affected me. And I'm wondering what your advice would be for a young musician of maybe a minority or marginalized culture experiencing some of that systemic racism in the music industry for the first time.
Have a strong community behind you. I mean, that's how we were able to kind of continue doing the work that we do. Thankfully now there's a lot more platforms than when I began this band. Now people can have more opportunities to kind of publish their own music and go direct to iTunes and Spotify and kind of create their own labels to create their own path forward. Yeah, I had that really awkward and kind of dehumanizing experience. But in the end, I was able to prove them wrong. I mean, this year we were covered in Rolling Stone 4 times, and Pitchfork and Spin and all that. So I still wish I had his contact info. I'd be like, in your face. But you got to persevere, and having a great group of people behind you who can support you is important.
Thank you so much, Simon. This is Simon Tam of the Slants. They're playing here at the Law School tonight. Go see it.
So tight, as if you're scared of falling. Did you ever feel like liquid hitting concrete floors, cold and wet and grimy? So manic. It's holiday.
So that was a video from Slants. You saw the story about the Slants, and it's an interesting topic. It's an interesting topic that we're actually going to think about right now. So now, how familiar are you with the Slants, Nick?
I'm not familiar at all. I don't think I've listened to any of their work.
Okay, I heard about the story a little bit, and it is interesting because again, what it is they are being, there's in the world we live in now, in the climate we live in now, and PC everything and all this stuff, it's interesting to see how things are really looked at and addressed when it comes to trying to treat everyone equally and be polite in a way and be fair. But now this is an example of this group, an all Asian group, wants to just represent and call themselves whatever name they want, whatever name that is, and they've been being stopped for over 8 years about this. So it's a wild, interesting story. It's got a lot of cultural ramifications to it, and there's a lot to be thought about when it comes to it, because again, it's about sensitivity.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, like, what if they chose a different name, but something that was equally as derogatory? Would they still be having this conversation?
Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting topic. Again, they are playing tonight at the U of A College of Law, so you can go see, judge for yourself, enjoy the show. Definitely go support, and maybe go find out other ways to support. Go check out what the band's doing on their website, what they're doing online. I mean, that's the only way. I mean, it's the voice of the people that always get things done. So I always say, if you believe in this, if you believe there's something that should be done to help the Slants, I say get involved. Because again, music is art, and art is about freedom of expression, and to not even be able to call yourselves whatever name you want to be called. If you think about how many offensive band names there are, okay? My favorite way to pick a band name, I'm gonna give you a tip. You just get a box Trivial Pursuit cards, and you just pick them out and just start reading the answers, and you're gonna get the best band name on earth. I don't know if they're culturally sensitive, but we'll see. People do say that this might have some ramifications because there's not a set standard. This might affect the long-going battle with like the Redskins in professional football and things like that. So it's interesting. It's an interesting climate in which we are in right now.
I mean, there are a lot of names that have that sort of derogatory connotation with it. You have things like the Chicago Blackhawks, Cleveland Indians, and like you said, Washington Redskins. So it's not uncommon for there to be that cultural tie-in in terms of like something that might not be the most sensitive towards that particular cultural group. So you think if it's okay at a professional level for something as nationally important as like a football team or a baseball team in the matter, you would think it'd be okay for just a band, something that I myself haven't even heard of.
Right.
So
it's a little smaller, and yet here we are with these old stereotypes of, again, Native Americans. We're still calling them Indians because some old pirate piece of, I'll stop myself, but that's the thing. Like, that is one of these things that it's time to maybe evolve. It's time to move forward, I think, and that's, I think, some of what it is. That's why people bring up changing those names, and that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to reclaim the word. Much like African Americans have done with, the N-word. They use it in art. They use it in rap. They use it to like express themselves. And it's always been this thing where they say they want to take it back. But there's a divide even in that culture where it's like, or just stop using it altogether, because that's how sensitive it is. Even talking about it right now, it's very sensitive to talk about.
It's funny too, because there's a lot that gets thrown around today about how newer generations are overly sensitive to things, and depending on where you sit on that regards is how you'll approach this situation. But like you said, they're trying to own it, and I feel like there are a lot of people that try to be too sensitive for them.
Yeah.
Like clearly it's not a problem with them. It's like, hey, that's a derogatory term towards Asians, but if they're not bothered by it, then why should other people?
Right. People do take it on. People kind of take on the offense, especially on that internet. They'll take it on themselves. So it's interesting. So I say, honestly, the thing is, best way to support, again, always go see a show. Go to see a show. So again, U of A, College of Law tonight, 8 o'clock. Go check them out. Go buy an album, but go see what their message actually is and go see what you can do to help them. Go to their website, go find their Instagram, get on their Twitter, go do all that stuff, and go get involved and help a smaller band get the rights to, you know, call themselves what they want. And in music, what are they, of course, doing? They're fighting for their right to party. And I think we can all agree that's the rights to fight for. So, what do you think? I'd say that's, you know, that's a good show to check out tonight.
Yeah, I mean, hey, as far as I can tell, it's just a free show to go see, listen to them. I think it's free.
I don't know if it's free, so don't quote them on that.
Don't quote me on that.
That's right.
But, I mean, they've been fighting it for so long, it's clearly important to them. Support the local guys or the little guys.
All right, I'd say to do it. That's the way to do it. All right, so go check out a show. Always check us out every day here at 5 o'clock. We're always doing the news for you, having some fun while doing it. Tell your friends, and again, share a link. This is Frank Powers.
And Nick Marquez. We'll catch you tomorrow at 5, just like we always do, for 5 on 20 News.